Hello, everyone, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Better the Pond Pondcast, where we talk to amazing people doing incredible things that lead the charge of generosity. My name is Warren Barry, and I'm your host and the founder of Instinctive Solutions, where we believe that everyone is not a duck, but that's what makes them awesome. Today, our guest is David MacLean. Our happiness best grows when transplanted in the soil of other people's lives. David speaks on wholehearted leadership and how we are meant to be spent for the benefit of others. The list of ways that David has created ripples and contributed to better the pond is absolutely extensive and truly inspiring. He is truly the epitome of what this podcast is all about. Ladies and gentlemen, David MacLean. Dave MacLean, I'm just so appreciative and honored that you're a guest here on my Better the Pond podcast. So thank you for your time.
Well, Warren, I appreciate the invitation. I've appreciated our interactions and the camaraderie that we built since you connected with my tech group. So I'm delighted to be here and have a conversation with you and see where we get to.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a great time spent together. And I was thinking of it after we last spoke. I said, I think we could almost pull a Joe Rogan here and do like about a 3.5 hour, but I'm not sure if anybody would actually endure that with us.
Dude, I don't know if I could share those same sentiments, but we'll give an hour a crack and see how it goes.
Absolutely. And before we jump into the meat and potatoes of this, we were talking earlier. So we met 2 years ago when I spoke to your Tech Canada group. So we'll give them a shout out. And then I had heard you on the Leadership Standard podcast with Garrett Maxwell, who's also a friend of mine. And it really just ignited me. I was moved by that podcast. So if anybody in the listeners want to go back and listen to the Leadership Standard, it was probably one of the best podcasts I think I've ever heard. It was just when you spoke. And when I heard that, I said, you know what, I have to get Dave MacLean on my podcast because he's just got such an incredible message to share. And I will say that you are actually the epitome of actually what this is all about. This podcast is about leading the charge of generosity. And I just really honestly believe that you live that and breathe that and you put that into action. And you're a guy who's out there changing the world. So again, as I said earlier, I'm honored to have you here today.
Well, really kind of you to say that, Warren, and I'll happy to talk about what you want to talk about and see where we get to and share some stories, and hopefully your listeners will be able to extract some value and have a great experience like you had through the other podcast I did. So looking forward to it.
All right, so here we go. So Dave, I want to know what got you from being a gosling, we're going way back, you're a gosling, right, to leaving the
Hold
nest.
it, are you going to use this whole duck metaphor the whole time?
You betcha, the whole metaphor weaves all the way through this, my friend.
Okay. Now is a gosling a duck or a goose? It's a goose, isn't it?
It's a goose. And very
okay, all right. Just got to track, make sure in my mind I'm picturing a goose. So when I was a baby goose.
Yeah, and then going to leave the nest.
Yeah.
Right. And to the guy that you are today, what is your backstory, Dave MacLean?
Whew, dude, that's a big picture. Well, I left the nest after I graduated from university.
But this is post Gosling, my friend. You are a native of Winnipeg, Manitoba, I do believe. Is that correct? That's where you were.
No.
All right.
No.
Take me back.
Do your background check well. No. So I grew up in North Vancouver.
That's where it started.
Yep, grew up in North Van, so I went to UBC in Vancouver, and so it was easy. Just lived at home and went to UBC, and that was fabulous experience and grew a lot. My wife and I got married after we graduated from university.
You are jumping way ahead of me, Dave. I'm going to cut you off once again. I want to take you way back to being Like
way back.
way back. So you're born in North Van. That's where you all. That's where.
No, wow. Okay, you want to go away? No, I was born in Kelowna, British Columbia.
Oh, so you came back. Okay.
Yeah, so I was born in Kelowna. We only stayed here a few years though, and then my family moved to Calgary. My dad was in the coffee business, and he sold coffee to restaurants. He was part of Dixon's Coffee, Tuxedo Foods, and Nabob, or whatever they traded ownership. So he got transferred to Calgary, and we left Kelowna to go to Calgary, which was a tough move, I think, for my family. My dad loved it here, loved boating. He instilled in me a love for boating. That's one of my passions. So we were in Calgary for 6 or 7 years, then moved, sadly, right when we were moving to Vancouver. My mom died when I was 9 years old. So it was, my dad and mom were looking forward to moving to Vancouver. Dad had always wanted to end up on the West Coast, but sadly we experienced this terrible tragedy prior to that move. So it ended up my dad and I moved to North Vancouver, and my brother and sister were grown up. They were 19 and 20, and they had moved out. So then my dad asked my sister if she would actually stay. She was going to be traveling, and he said, would you stay and basically be my mother? Take care of me. So that was our beginnings in North Vancouver way back when.
This is why I love to hear this part of the story, right? This is the beginnings of Dave MacLean. So wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. That must have been quite. How old were you at the time? You were 9.
9, yeah, yeah.
That must have been quite an impact on you as a young man. Not only losing your mom and then moving, so that was like your world got turned upside down.
Yeah, I mean, it was mom's passing that impacted everybody, and it's interesting. She died of a massive heart attack. In fact, I was there with her the night she had her heart attack. I saw her collapse on the floor in the kitchen, and the ambulance came and took her to the hospital. And I didn't understand everything that's going on. A 9-year-old, what's going on? And I remember we went back to the hospital a number of days later, and we were sitting in the waiting room, and my dad, my brother and sister and I, and again, they're 19 and 20, I'm 9. And the doctor came down the hall, and he just said, I'm sorry, Mr. MacLean, there's nothing we could do. And my dad and brother and sister knew that meant mom was gone. Mm-hmm. I didn't understand. And I remember they started crying, everybody's crying, and I'm looking up going, what's going on? We walked into the elevator, and I'm looking up at them going, what's going on? What's going on? And my sister looked at me and she said, Davey, you will never see mommy ever again. You will never see her again. She's gone. And that I could understand, that I won't ever see my mommy. So yeah, that was, it was a major shift, a seismic tragedy for us. And actually, I mean, if you want to go in the deep end of the pond, we could talk about the kinds of the wounds and false beliefs that came out of that shaped me as a boy and then a young man, that I had to work through in counseling when I probably was 30 years old, just unpacking all of those false beliefs that came out of that woundedness. So yeah, it was significant.
See, I told you we could actually do like a 3.5-hour Joe Rogan here, but in the essence of time. So I'm sorry to hear that. And I mean, I do believe though that the circumstances and events of our lives when we're younger do shape us.
Totally. Yeah.
As we get older. So, and what we do with that is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And sadly, these kinds of things happen to all of us. If we were, again, if you and I sat down, maybe over a bottle of wine or whatever, I said, Warren, I would love to hear your story. Tell me your story right from the beginning. I know there are going to be elements of great pain and disappointment and perhaps tragedy, and there's going to be great joys and loves that you've had and all of that. And it's those times of wounding where we can take hold of, appropriate false beliefs that shift how we live, how we lead, how we love, how we engage with the world, or how we don't engage, how we withdraw because of that. And it was, when I was about 30 years old, a mentor in my life at the time said, Dave, you know what? I think you need to do a little counseling here. I'm thinking, what? Why? What's wrong with me? Only wimps go to counselors. He said, well, that's part of the reason why it'd probably be good for you. But I had to, do a deep dive and figure out, okay, what do I really believe? What do I believe about me? What do I believe about the world? What do I believe about people? And I had to go back to these times, like my mom's death and other things, and realize, wow, I adopted a false belief at that point in time that doesn't serve me well. This doesn't help me. So now how do I untangle all of that and deal with it? So yeah, you're right. All of our stories, we've got elements that we either have to unpack and deal with, those limiting beliefs, or people don't. And you wonder, okay, you're trapped to a certain degree. These limiting beliefs have kept you, and you can get free of them if you're willing to do the heavy lifting, to dig down and figure out, okay, what's really going on here, and be aware of what you're believing and then shift what you're believing. So that's been part of a really important part of my journey.
And I can see that. And the reason I'm bringing this up, David, because I can see the leader that you are today, and knowing you from the work that we did at Tech, it shows your compassion, your leadership skills, and your love and belief of people. Really, I mean, that's I don't think that's just your energy that you put out and that leads in front of you. So that's why I wanted to actually touch on that. Because it shaped that piece of you, and that's just who you, in my opinion, that's who you are.
Well, it's interesting, Warren, that you say that. Leadership often, I think there's two components to leadership, and there's two components to life. But if we look specifically at leadership is what we do. But I think more importantly, leadership is who we are. So who we are creates an impact, whether we're trying to create an impact or trying to influence or not. Who we are and how we show up influences and impacts other people. And then we can add to who we are by things that we do and practices that we engage in with regard to leadership and principles and procedures and methodology or whatever. But I concur with you that who we are is really the most important thing. And this is something that I see oftentimes. I'll say in men oftentimes are defined by what we do. So there isn't necessarily a depth of identity outside of what we do. So our performance then defines who we are. And I think it's totally backwards. I think who we are needs to define and inform what we do. Because you see oftentimes, men who may lose their jobs. I mean, they're at the end of themselves. I know a leader who from back east owned very significant business, very significant, worth millions and millions and millions. He decided, I'm going to live the good life. They sold their business, moved out here to Kelowna, bought a gorgeous house on the hill right above us, overlooking the lake. We're, going to ski and golf and do everything. And he fell into depression after a year, or, don't quote me on the timing, but let's say a year or two. And because he realized he was defined by his business. And when the business was gone, I don't know who I am now.
I lost my identity.
You totally lost his identity. Yeah. And that to me is symptomatic or demonstrates a key challenge that I believe we have all over the place with regard to leaders, in that we're defined by what we do instead of, no, I know who I am. I know what I bring. I know my value and worth. And I'm going to bring who I am regardless of where I am. And it's going to be expressed and demonstrated through what I do instead of what I do defining me.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree, and I will say that, and it's not pumping your tires, but the energy that you have is exactly that. That was my first impression when I met you. I hadn't even spoke to you, and I already got that energy from you already. So, which I think is such a gift to, well, number one, anyone you meet, but also to the people that you lead with your tech groups.
Well, thank you, and that is certainly my hope.
It
and
works.
my desire.
Yes. So to be a good steward of time, because there is so much I want to unravel with you, because you've done so much in the world. So I want to come back a little bit sorry, Amazon's here. Thank you. There's time.
I'm in the middle of a live podcast, Amazon.
Do they not know?
I know, like what? But we're so used to that now with the whole Zoom culture and everything. It's like, oh, my dog just made a mess on the floor. I'm glad that you can't smell things through the computer.
I might not even edit this out.
Yeah.
So let's go back to no, when you had to leave the nest. So when Dave MacLean, so you were in Kelowna, Calgary, North Van, and then bring me up to speed from when you left the nest to where you are today.
Well, my wife and I got married 35 years ago, and we moved to Winnipeg because my brother lives in Winnipeg. He's actually a pastor in Winnipeg, has been pastoring there for 40 years or more. And he was really a mentor, and still continues to be a mentor in my life. And at that point, I really wanted to have a mentor who could help me grow as a young man, as a husband, as a contributor, to learn how to live well. So we moved to Winnipeg, really, to connect and engage with my brother, and I started working in the business community. I'd actually applied because I wanted to be a teacher.
Really?
Yep, I wanted to be a teacher. I loved coaching. I'd been involved in a lot of athletics, and I had coached a lot. And my wife is a teacher, passionate teacher. In fact, she teaches teachers at the university now, so she equips students to become teachers. And I thought, I want to be a teacher. I want to teach high school kids. I want to coach everything. And so I was enrolled in the University of Manitoba to get my teaching degree. I already had my first degree that was a combination between commerce and phys ed. And so I needed to get my teaching degree. And then I was going to teach phys ed and business and history and whatever. But I realized, because we're starting out in marriage, if I go to school in the first few years of marriage, all the financial pressure is going to be on my wife. And I thought, well, I don't want her. She's leaving her family. She's leaving where she grew up in a new city, strange city. I thought, that's a lot of stress. So I ended up working in the marketplace. I got a position as an account executive with Reimer Express Lines, and it was a great experience. They trained me, put me through the Xerox Professional Selling Skills program and the Dale Carnegie Public Relations program. That was fabulous.
You sold photocopiers?
No, Reimer Express. They're a trucking company.
Oh, okay. My apologies.
Yep. So I had a territory in the city and hundreds of clients, and my job was to get them to put their freight into our trucks to ship it all across Canada.
So you're doing sales back then?
Yep. I'm a sales guy, man. That's my roots.
And so where did you go from there? So there you're a sales guy, because I mean, there's so much to unravel when you're in Winnipeg. And again, to be a good steward of time, it's hard to unravel all of that, because
Sure.
I mean, you had the MacLean group, and I mean, you got into marketing.
Well, that came afterwards.
Yeah.
So I went from Reimer, I shifted from there. I did go back to university, got my teaching degree. Then I was teaching in the high school, and I realized this world is too small for me. The classroom, it was too small, and it was repetitive, and I realized, wow, I love teaching, but this repetitive classroom environment doesn't work for me. And I mean, to cut a long story short, we ended up, my wife and I, I ended up with the Winnipeg Jets Hockey Club. So left teaching, ended up with the Winnipeg Jets Hockey Club, was working with them and as a sports marketing specialist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But when they were going to leave Winnipeg, we knew that was ending. So my wife and I said, okay, you know what, we'd had 2 boys at this point in time. They're little toddlers still in diapers. And we said, do we want to raise our kids in Winnipeg? And both of us said, no, we want to get back to BC. So we said, let's go. And we headed back to BC, came to the Okanagan, and I launched MacLean Group and MacLean Sports Marketing.
Wow. That's a big shift.
Yep.
I love your story.
And I will introduce you to a new word, exilified.
Exilified.
Exilified is the combination between exhilarated and terrified. And that's what I was doing at the time. I was exilified. Anybody who's starting a new business, Warren, you know this, you're exilified. You know, you're exhilarated, but at the same time, you are scared spitless. You're terrified. So I think
can I steal that?
You can.
All right.
Spread the love, man.
Absolutely. So, so now for going from now the MacLean Group and you're doing the sports, where did you go from there?
Well, I ran my agencies for 15 years. We had some great success. Profit Magazine ranked us as one of the fastest growing companies in Canada. And you know, we're in a community of 100,000 people. So staffing that and driving that, I mean, it was a wild ride. And I realized I don't want to run an agency for the rest of my life. You know, this is great. However, I loved speaking, teaching. You know, it's in me. I'm a sales guy. So I really wanted to step out and do more speaking and teaching and all of that. So I launched Wholehearted Leaders. And we're also quite active in the Christian community. So I launched a work with Christian men called Wholehearted Men and started teaching and writing on leadership and how to lead our lives well. Started writing articles, you know, on leadership. Every week I'd do a 700-word article that was published in our paper that went throughout the Valley, and then latterly with BC Business Magazine. And really started to unpack that passion of leadership and what does it mean? And the real message is wholehearted leadership. What does it mean to lead wholeheartedly? What does it mean to lead from the heart and to actually connect and engage with people at a heart level? So I began speaking and writing on all of that. And then I heard about TEC, the executive committee, this global leadership organization that helps mentor CEOs and executives and leaders in how to grow their leadership. And a buddy referred to me and said, dude, you were made to be involved with TEC. Like, you're wired for this. And one thing led to another, and I became a TEC chair and started leading a CEO group and a key group. So sort of have these tandem elements of working with TEC, with leaders, and then carrying the message of wholehearted leadership. What does it mean to truly lead and live from the heart? And so now I'm speaking throughout our TEC network on the topic of wholehearted leadership. In fact, just yesterday I spoke with a group in Calgary about wholehearted leadership. So that's kind of my world post agencies now.
It's interesting. You've taken, I think, just your love of people, your love of teaching, coaching, sales, speaking, right? And we know that you do not like redundancy. I know that about you. So everything always has to be new. So you've taken all those bits and kind of wrapped it up into a really interesting package, right? Which is you. And then you're taking that out into your community.
Yeah.
That's a gift.
And you know what? I am really, really grateful to be in the season and role that I'm in. I've looked at all the different aspects of my background, and they've come together in a time now where I feel like I am in a sweet spot, where I get to engage every day in what I'm passionate about. And you know what, my mission statement is to wholeheartedly lead so others can wholeheartedly live. And every day, as best I know how, I'm endeavoring to wholeheartedly lead to help other people wholeheartedly live. And that means live well, lead well, and love well. So yeah, I'm very grateful for the place and the space that I get to live and lead from.
So this is the perfect segue into my next question as we go through the podcast here. So I believe, Dave, that we are all odd ducks, that we're all misfits. We're all unique, right? So can you tell me about a time when you didn't fit in, when you did things that were different and unique to you? And really, it's kind of this. I look at this piece as like, what is it that makes you awesome? And I don't mean this from an egotistical standpoint. It's not egotistical, right? It's that what is it that you have that that you're that misfit, you're the odd duck, but yet you take that and put it out into the world. So when was a time that worked for you, positive or negative?
Yeah. Well, I want to, you know what, when you said odd duck, and I'm thinking, how am I an odd duck? And odd duck meaning, how am I unique?
Mm-hmm.
And two things came to mind right away, and they're totally disparate and very different, but yet I think reflect who I am and how I'm wired. So one, I'm going to go way back to when I was a boy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've always been passionate and out there and taking initiative and going for it. But one of the aspects of who I am is, and I'll be vulnerable here, I'm very tender-hearted. I'm very tender-hearted. And that can mean that I cry easily. And we'll joke about this in our family. We'll be watching, in fact, my wife and I, it's funny, she'll put on a chick flick in our bedroom. We've got a TV there, and she likes to, watch. That's sort of her man cave, her woman, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, so she's watching, and she'll invite me to come, whatever. And I'm thinking, oh, I mean, I love action, Gladiator, Braveheart, Lord of the Rings. Those are my favorite. But we're watching these movies, and I'm the guy who's getting emotional watching this movie, and I'm looking at her, tears in my eyes, go, how can you not get moved by that? Could you, whatever? And we joke about it, but it's part of how I'm wired. And as a boy, I had this tender heart, empathetic, compassionate, open-hearted. And there was a time when I despised that oddness. I thought, what's wrong with me? I get emotional. I get moved by this. Tears get, well, when you're a boy, you don't want to be the crying boy.
Mm-hmm.
And, I loved my father to bits. He's now passed on. But one of the things he used to say is, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about.
Right. Yeah.
So this despising tears or tenderness or whatever. So I didn't like myself. I didn't like that, how I was wired. And of course, the tragedy that we suffered from my mom. So, it was, I wanted to hide that and stuff it down and be strong and be tough. So playing football and, doing on the wrestling team, doing all that, whatever. But it couldn't change the fact that I've got this tender heart. And so years later, as I'm working through all this stuff, I'm giving myself permission to be tender hearted. And that, I realize, is part of my superpower. Mm-hmm. That I can connect and engage with people. And I can be in a one-to-one session when one of my members is in the midst of despair, something difficult, and there we have a connection. I'm feeling the pain. I've been up in front of my tech groups getting emotional and whatever, and it's appropriate and it's right, and I'm not the crybaby, but I realized I felt like an odd duck. And I've now realized, well, that's part of my superpower. I can connect people that way. So one story. The other story, when I was with the Winnipeg Jets Hockey Club, can't remember if I said that. Anyways, worked in the National Hockey League with the Winnipeg Jets Hockey Club. I had this crazy idea. The Jets are leaving Winnipeg. And I thought, I got to do something to leave a memory for the fans of Manitoba. This is huge. Like, I had people calling me, crying on the phone, saying, I can't believe the Jets are leaving, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought, I got to do something. So creativity has always been just part of who I am. And I know you're a guitar player. So I'm a guitar player. And what I used to do at people's birthdays was I'd find out who their favorite band was, or maybe one of their favorite songs. I'd change the lyrics so it was about them. And then I'd sing it at their birthday party. So it's a classic rock song. In fact, I just did it for one of my tech members last year. He turned 50. I did Randy Bachman's Taking Care of Business. It was great. Anyways, so I thought, I'm going to do that with musicians in Manitoba. I'm going to take well-known Manitoba musicians. I'm going to rewrite the lyrics to their songs. So they're about players on the hockey team and the hockey team. I'm going to get the original artist to re-record their song with my lyrics. We're going to produce a CD called Hockey Rock. I'm going to sell it through HMB stores, and I'm going to donate all the profit to our Goals for Kids Society for sick children. So we're going to do some great work in the community, and the artists are going to do it for free because the money's all going to charity. When I brought that up to the management at the Jets, I got this great vision. I was an odd duck. It's like, what is wrong with you? No, you can't do that. No, you got other stuff to focus on. So actually, I had to do it secretly. They didn't know until I got all the pieces together. And then I came back and said, hey, look, it's all paid for by HMV. It's all covered. I've got this guy. This is a great concept. And then they were like, okay, whatever, do it. As long as it's paid for and whatever. So odd duck.
See, and so what I was said earlier, that's what makes you awesome, right? And again, I said, this is not at all about ego, right? It's just those parts of you of who you are as a person, right? That makeup that you are, right? Makes you the odd duck. But then from that, you make the world a better place.
Well, and it's interesting. And when I talk about the heart of a leader and wholehearted leadership, one of the things I talk about is authenticity. And one of the little lines I use in that is, don't try to be anybody else. They're already taken. So who are you? How have you been wired? And what are your passions and experiences and how you're gifted? So how do you then express your heart through all of that? And it's going to be different and it's going to be distinct. And there's going to be a certain kind of person that is really attracted to that. And others may not be, but hey, that's okay.
That's okay. Interesting enough, Dave, that and I've seen this over and over of the things that happened to us as kids. We talked about this earlier, but it's not so much the things that happened to us, but who we were. So you were this young boy, you were tender-hearted, you'd be considered soft, but really weren't, right? But you had a big heart. Right. And you tried to shove it down because, well, that doesn't really fit in the societal mode. But yet here you are today running an organization of wholehearted leadership.
Yeah.
Isn't that
I know.
Come back around.
I know, it's wild. It's wild. And it's interesting in the midst of that, who I was always an initiator. So I'd be the guy calling up all the boys. Hey guys, we're all going to skateboard to school, meet at my house, and we'll leave at 8:00. So boom, the gang comes to my place. We all hop on our skateboards, go to whatever. And, then playing on the football team or doing the track and field or whatever. So loved rallying around people, helping to initiate people getting together. And yet at the same time, we're all wired differently and we all bring, different kind of perspectives.
The world needs everyone. But here you are, the kid, right, who's bringing everybody to go skateboard at 8:00 in the morning to school. You're rallying everyone around. And interesting enough, you're still doing the same thing now.
Yeah. except I don't skateboard anymore. Like Clint Eastwood said, every man's got to know his limitations. So that doesn't happen.
Absolutely. So moving on from there. So Dave, can you tell me about a time when someone did something for you that left an impact on your life?
Oh man, I mean, there's lots and lots of, I mean, that happens on an ongoing basis.
What comes to mind? What's the first thought that comes to your mind?
Well, the first thought, I mean, there's lots of people who have done obviously simple things, acts of kindness, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
simple acts of kindness. And they don't need to be huge. It can be a simple act of kindness that changes things completely. And the other end of the spectrum, it can be a lifetime spent mentoring, nurturing, caring. And it's so if I go to this end of the spectrum, somebody who has changed my life really is my brother. He has been a mentor of mine and continues to be. We're best friends. But my brother has faithfully, it's in, sorry, I'm going to click into my teaching mode here. So when I'm speaking on wholehearted leadership, one of the things we get to is we ask the question, who's a great leader and why? And people will say, oh, Winston Churchill or, Martin Luther King Jr. or whatever. And the reasons are obvious. But they don't see themselves as being a leader necessarily because, well, that's a leader, Winston Churchill. I don't do that. And then we talk about, okay, well, John Maxwell says leadership is really influence. So who has positively influenced you more than anybody in your life? Whose fingerprints are all over your life? Who's made you you? And I get the same answers every time from people. My mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, my uncle, my aunt, my grandma, my grandpa, my coach, or whatever, but it's someone they're very close to.
Mm-hmm.
And then we ask the question, how have they done that? And it's the same two things every time, And that's, I pull out of that and I say, then this is leadership. These are the two foundations of leadership. And the two things are this: they loved me. And they helped me to see that I could do more than I thought I could, or be more than I thought I could. Every story, no matter it was their grandma or their mom. I was speaking in Parliament Hill in Ottawa, a room full of members of Parliament, and I asked this question. I said, who's willing to share? And it was quiet, crickets, because this is a little more vulnerable. And the guy stands up and he goes, okay, I'll share. I said, okay, who changed you more than anybody else? He said, my mom. How'd she do that? She loved me, and she held me to a higher standard than I was willing to hold myself, and helped me to see I could become more than I wanted to be, or that I could be, that I thought I could be. My brother has been that person in my life who has loved me and helped me to see that I could be more than I thought I could be. So he has changed my life through myriad ways, sometimes simple acts of kindness, other times grander gestures.
So may I quote Dave MacLean this moment? I think it's quite fitting.
Okay.
Our
See if I agree with myself.
Our happiness best grows when transplanted in the soil of other people's lives.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And so would you say that about your brother?
Well, here's my perspective when I said that. Here's what led me to say that. You hear a lot of people talk about they just want to be happy, and down in the US, the pursuit of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that happiness is a destination. I don't believe that happiness is something we pursue. Because if you're pursuing your own happiness, it has an inherent selfishness in it, that it becomes about me. What makes me feel better? What makes me feel happy? And that's inherently selfish. And selfish, self-centered people typically are never happy.
True.
So we learned this when we were, and I'm not going to go into the depth of this unless you want to go there. We took our kids out of school for 2 years. We did homeschooling and then did global travel. And we did a lot of service work in different countries.
Mm-hmm.
And as we're engaged with Dalit children in India, the lowest caste, the untouchables, serving, loving them, we're happy. We're happy. It's not about me. And we're in like a stinky, smelly environment, whatever, but we're engaged with these kids, working with orphans, and they don't have anything. And I'm realizing my happiness grows when it's transplanted into the soil of other people's lives. So it's not about me pursuing my happiness. I believe happiness is the byproduct of a life well served. And when we serve other people, when we realize it's not about me, but how can I help other people grow, and how can I help other people experience love and hope and life and joy and all of that, when I can be a contributor to other people's well-being, lo and behold, I'm happy. It's great. So that's the origin of that quote, that my happiness best grows when I transplant it in the soil of someone else's life.
And the reason I'm bringing this up, Dave, is because I believe, just from your story, that your brother believed the same thing, and it's the ripple effect, right?
Yeah.
So he transplanted, that into your life.
Mm-hmm.
You grew, right, and then you turned around and did the same thing. Right. The pebble was thrown into the pond, and the ripples went out, right?
True.
And that's why I was bringing that up.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. He helped sow that perspective, that truth, that philosophy, that worldview into me.
And another Dave MacLean quote, if I may, right? We are meant to be spent for the benefit of others.
That's the title of my book that I have yet to publish.
Ah,
Third rewrite. I'm getting closer.
I can't wait to read it because I think it's going to be absolutely amazing. And again, even that quote is just, to me, that embodies you, Dave MacLean, right? That's just who you are. So now moving on. So because this is where the meat hits, because this is what this whole podcast is really about, although we love your backstory, right? But what are you doing, and for you particularly, what have you done to better the pond? And I know that's a big list. And more importantly, right, why are you doing it? And you led into this. I know that you had brought your kids out of school and you homeschooled and you traveled to many countries and you're helping people in India. And so I want to hear that piece of all the things that you've done to better the pond, Dave, and why.
Well, let's start with why. That sounds familiar. I think somebody else said that. So my why, I believe at the end of the day, I am on this earth to love God and love people. So if I look at my why do I do what I do? Ultimately, it all comes down to loving God and loving people. So bettering the pond, to quote Warren Barry, is really my way of how do I love God and love people? So what does that look like? How do you put meat on those bones? How does it become active and real? And that happens in simple going out for a coffee with a buddy who may be having marital issues. I had a buddy contact me and say, I don't know what to do. My wife has just said she wants to leave me, and I'm totally shocked. So how do I help better his pond and walk with him and journey with him in the midst of all of that, and help love him through that tragedy and that took years that we journeyed through. And then how do you do more grand gestures like, when we took our kids out of school and did travel and served in developing countries because we wanted them to understand we're all meant to be spent for the benefit of others. And we're incredibly privileged being here in North America. And because we're privileged, we've got a responsibility to contribute to the betterment of other people's lives. So let's show you what that looks like, what the world looks like, how you can contribute, even as a boy, of 12 years old. How do you contribute to the other people's lives? How do you do that at school with your friends one-on-one? And how do you do it when we're in an orphanage in India? And how do we care for these kids? Or, when I was running my agencies, one of the principles that we worked off was the principle that I called prosperity for purpose.
Mhm.
And the belief is that business isn't an end in itself. Business isn't about business. Business is a means to an end. And I would suggest the end of business is contributing to the betterment of people's lives in our communities. So why do we do business? We do business to help make people's lives in our community better. So we do that with the way that we interact with our employees, our clients, our vendors, et cetera, our community, customers, obviously. And we do it by recognizing that in business, we get to make profit. Awesome. So what do we do with that profit? We get to use that profit to, again, put it back into people's lives and back into the community. So this principle of prosperity for purpose, we lived by. It was part of how we differentiated ourselves as an agency and a sports marketing agency, saying to people, hey, every dollar that you spend with MacLean Group, part of that's going to go to help making our world a better place. And here's how we do that. So we partner with organizations globally and locally on many different fronts. There were lots of different organizations we partner with, and we'd help tell the story to our clients. Hey, you worked with us, so you actually helped buy a cow for an impoverished family in Ethiopia so that they can actually create a sustainable life for themselves.
Can you actually add on a bit? Because we had talked probably a few weeks back about this, and you were saying that, with your clients, you used to give a gift and whatnot to them,
Yeah, yeah.
and then you decided that, well, that really wasn't working because it ended up in some dusty bookshelf somewhere.
Yeah,
And so you would change the game.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I would love for my listeners to listen to that, what you came up with, because I think it's absolutely brilliant.
Okay. So every Christmas, we're a marketing agency, and what do marketing agencies sell? Ideas, creativity. So every Christmas we'd come up with this super creative Christmas gift that we'd work on and send it to our clients. And really all we were hoping is they would look at that and go, MacLean Group is the coolest agency I've ever seen. I love working with them, or I want to work with them more. It was that kind of a deal.
Mhm.
And then we began to realize that, and we tried to make them, something that would last, that they'd utilize for a long time. So whether it's a calendar or whatever, but I started to look at it and realize we're spending thousands of dollars to create this impact for a very short period of time. And I thought, you know what? No, I'm not going to do that anymore, because these people don't need that. And we'd experienced need with real people in desperate situations. So what we did was World Vision, that many of your listeners would be aware of. They're a child sponsorship organization, care for children at risk all over the world through child sponsorship. And those sponsorships actually help better the communities that the kids live in, and there's projects that get undertaken. So they had a Christmas catalog where you could send the gift of chickens or a harvest pack or medical supplies or a cow or whatever it would be. So we took the thousands of dollars that we would normally spend on Christmas gifts for our clients, and I distributed it to the staff and said, okay, you take the World Vision catalog, you've got X amount of money to spend. What do you want to buy? And so they were picking, again, chickens, cows, drugs for AIDS clinics, whatever it was. And so for Christmas then, instead of a gift, we created our own Christmas card, and it would fold out, and on the inside was a map of the world. And then we'd have little arrows saying, chickens to a family in Somalia, AIDS medicine to a clinic in Honduras, whatever it was. And then we sent this out to our clients and said, hey, we want to thank you for choosing to work with MacLean Group. And by working with MacLean Group, you're helping to change the world and make it a better place. Have a look at what you've done this year. And they open it up and they see all this stuff and say, you made this happen. We're delighted to partner with you, and we look forward to more partnership in the year to come," or whatever. And our staff loved it. The clients loved it. In fact, the staff loved it so much, they went, "You know what? We're going to do this with our family at Christmas," because you buy gifts for people and you think, they don't need anything. What am I going to do? So then they'd say, "Hey, we just bought some chickens for a family in Somalia for you. Merry Christmas," or whatever. So yeah, it was it was a great project. We loved it.
Well, I love the idea of that, just for the fact that, you made the world a better place, right? It wasn't just about buying a client a token gift. It was actually the embetterment of humanity,
Yeah.
right? With just an idea.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. I'll tell you another little story about this. We were with the company, we were doing mission, vision, values training, etc. So we had a day set aside. We're doing all this work. And we got to, we're talking about our why, our mission. Why are we doing what we do?
Mhm.
And I said, we do this to make the world a better place. We do this to better people's lives. And one of my young employees at the time went, "Dave, that's not why we market. We market to help companies grow and make more money." So we started to unpack this more and more, and she wasn't really getting it, but I was adamant, no, this is why we do it. This is what we're all about. So anyways, a couple of years pass and she comes back to me and says, "Hey, Dave, can I meet with you on something?" And she had been, one of our clients was a large not-for-profit, and she had been working with this not-for-profit that was caring for homeless people. And she came to me and sat down and said, "Do you remember that time when we were doing our mission vision and you said, we're here to make the world a better place?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, "You remember how I didn't agree with you and I didn't believe it?" And I said, "Yeah, I remember that." And she said, "Well, I'm totally sold on that now. And I'm actually leaving to join the not-for-profit to work full time just with them because I get it." And I looked at that and I thought, awesome. Even though we were losing a great employee, I thought, she's getting it. She
Yeah.
sees. How do we contribute to the betterment of our community? Well, she can do it doing that. Awesome. Go for it.
Absolutely. And then it comes back to ripple effect, right?
Yeah.
Right, that you've instilled in someone else, and they're going to do the same for someone else, and so on. What other interesting stories? We won't unpack it too much, but I just love and people can watch your TED Talk as well, right? To understand the story though of when you took your kids out of school for 2 years and you went around countries, but they actually wrote their books,
Yeah.
and then the profit from the books went back into the communities.
Yeah. Yeah. So as part of a homeschool assignment project, they each wrote children's books, and they were very simple. So Benjamin's book was called Goodbye Zoo, and it's the story of Billy going to the zoo with his mom, and he's saying goodbye to all the animals with rhyming. Toodaloo, kangaroo, see ya, hyena. It's been a laugh, tall giraffe. And he's just saying goodbye to all the animals. But what he did was every one of the scenes he made out of plasticine. And then we took digital photos of them and made the book up with all these plasticine scenes. It's awesome. David's was called Jeffy's World Safari, and it was Jeffy traveling the world, seeing all the different groups of animals. So he would see a pod of whales, a parliament of owls, an ambush of tigers, a crash of rhinos.
A
And so he drew
gaggle
all
of
these.
geese.
A which?
A gaggle of geese.
Yes, but that wasn't in the book. Sorry, dude. But that could be volume 2. So David drew all these. And my agency, we designed the books, printed them up, put a website together, and people could go online, buy the books. And we were donating all the net proceeds after the cost of printing, etc., to a global children's charity called Hope for the Nations that was caring for orphans around the world. And then we donated hundreds of copies of the books to Hope for the Nations that distributed the books to the children's homes around the world. And then we also donated funds to the Mountain View Conservation Center down in the Lower Mainland and the Great Bear Rainforest Society, because our sons were quite passionate about wildlife.
Wow.
It was fun. It was a great deal. And here, I got to tell you one story.
Absolutely.
So we we had been doing, I'll tell you two stories actually. So we'd been traveling around the world and we'd bring books with us and we'd distribute books to, we worked in orphanages and children's homes. And so we were distributing to the kids wherever we worked. In schools, we were working in schools and all that. And then the Hope for the Nations had sent these out to their children's homes around the world. Well, somebody contacted us and said, hey, we've got your books and we're working with children in Africa. And I forget which exact country it was, but it was children who were orphaned due to a civil war that had killed their parents. So it was like the Rwanda scenario from years ago, but similar kind of ethnic cleansing. And they said, we're using your kids' books as art therapy with these children to recover from the tragedy that they've experienced. So here are these boys who've made these art books, and we'd love you to start drawing. So these kids were drawing, and they were drawing the things that they'd experienced. So it was part of this therapy they were leading them in. And so they said, we just want to thank you. These books have empowered us to be able to work with these kids who had suffered just unspeakable tragedies. So that was a profound moment for all of us, realizing, wow, like you said, the ripple effect in the pond.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things too that you just never know. You start something and you just never know where it's going to end.
No.
And I always say one of my favorite sayings is, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Yeah. Well, and there's a verse in scripture that says that man plans his way, but God directs his path. We make plans and sometimes they go and other times, no, here's a little tangent or a detour that you're going off on. I got to tell you a funny story with regard to where the books go. We were heading off on another trip. So we were down in Seattle airport with the boys, the long customs line, that you're snaking through. Well, I'm looking back and I see a guy that I think I knew from years ago named Larry. And so anyways, we're snaking, and it turns out that we come right beside each other here. And I said, hey, are you Larry? He goes, yeah, you're Dave, aren't you? And I said, oh, Larry, good to see you. What are you doing? Blah, 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 blah. And he said, oh, I'm actually doing some volunteer work for this global charity, Hope for the Nations. Oh, really? What are you doing? Well, we've got these children's books that I'm traveling around, and I'm delivering these children's books to our homes and wherever. And I said, oh, that's cool. Who wrote? Oh, they were these kids that did these children's books. I said, do they look like these kids? And he looks at David and Benjamin and he goes, dude, those are your kids' books I'm distributing. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. So like you said, you never know where the ripples are going to go.
Absolutely. That is a fantastic story.
Yeah.
So moving on, again, still trying to be a steward of time. I think, Dave, I'm going to have you back on again, and we'll continue this story. But until then, looking back and looking forward on the lessons that you've learned along your way, paint me a picture of your golden pond. What does the future look like from the lessons that you've learned? Where do you think the future looks like? You're the sage on the pond. You have the crystal ball. What do you hope for the future?
Like for me, or for what I want to be able to accomplish?
Yes. For what you want to accomplish.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. A few years ago, the sense that I got was I need to step off the stage and step into people's lives, and started to do far more coaching and really connecting and engaging with the intimacy of people's lives and journeys. That has been a rich, powerful, and profound experience. So to a certain degree, my world got a little smaller. Because as you know, Warren, when you're on a stage and you're speaking to, hundreds or thousands of people, you think, whoa, I'm making this big impact or whatever, but you're not necessarily connected with those people. Right. And when you're in a coaching scenario, you're connected with people at a heart level. Mm-hmm. And so I've been journeying like that for a number of years now. And I think the next season, I'm in the midst of fleshing out my wholehearted leadership model, really. And I'm going to be publishing my first book called Wholehearted Leadership Volume 1. It's a collection of, I've written, hundreds of articles. So I've compiled these articles. I call them bite-sized bits of truth that, enable you to create change in your life. So there's 5 volumes in these books. And so I'm putting together a program that, there's books, there's courses, there's videos, motivational moments, looking at creating a subscription-based program that people can subscribe to and get access to, webinar, the motivational moments, courses, books, and then do some events, inviting people, and even an intimate, we've got a larger boat down on the coast, and I love boating. So I've put together a 4-day retreat on the boat where we cruise through the Gulf Islands and do a deep dive. And that would be for, 4 to 6 people, just deep dive into this. So when I look at where I want to get to, I want to put this whole intentional program together around wholehearted leadership with all different elements that people, I hope globally, can connect to, and we can help create ripples in a bigger pond where people, I hope and I trust, can be transformed through the message of wholehearted leadership.
Wow, that is fantastic. And and I believe that when you throw that pebble in and help those people, right, they will do the same for others.
Oh, that's the whole principle. Absolutely. Because when we talk about wholehearted leadership, the 5 core values are humility, empathy, authenticity, risk, comprised of being courageous, vulnerable, and willing to fail, and tenacity. And it's all wrapped up in the philosophy that we are meant to be spent for the benefit of other people. How do I spend my life that's going to benefit other people? And the 2 pillars of great leadership are loving people and helping them to become more than they ever thought they could be. So that's the whole sort of wholehearted leadership package in a nutshell.
Which goes back to my beginning of this podcast. I said, Dave, you are just the epitome of everything that I'm trying to have people to say to inspire others to do the same. So that's brilliant. So I have one last question for you, Dave.
I hope it's an easy one.
I think it should be fairly easy. So, okay, Dave MacLean, if you are standing on the top of a mountain,
yeah,
and the world is intently listening to you, what do you have to say?
Dude, that is not an easy question, Warren.
Oh, for you, I believe that it is.
No, wow, like there is a depth, there's hours and days of teaching behind that. But if I had to boil it down, like just the funnel, do. What does this come out as? Okay. I would say love God and love people. That's what it's all about.
That's exactly what I expected to hear.
Well, that was a lot of sifting down, thinking, dude, I'm going through all this content. What would I say? But if I could only say one simple truth that I think would be palatable to a large number of people coming from different perspectives and different values and all of that, from this podcast, that's what I'd boil it down to.
Love God and love people. Brilliant. And I, as I said earlier too, David, that is the energy that you give. I think to everyone that you meet, it leads the way. You just happen to follow it.
Well, thank you, Warren. As you know, all of us, we get up every day and we go, okay, how can I make a difference today? What can I do? And what does that look like? And for me, when I get up in the morning, I personally pray and I say, Lord, how do I love you today? How do I love people today? What does that look like? And there, there's a genre that I move in with regard to coaching and teaching and all of that. And it's trying to meet people where they're at, find out where their heart's at, what their desire is, what their hopes, dreams, expectations, goals are, and hey, what can I do to help empower, equip, envision, engage, encourage you to move in that direction? So I think we each try to do that in our own way every day. And Warren, I want to commend you for this podcast. I know this was a venture that no doubt you were exhilarated when you looked at this and thought, oh, who am I to do this, whatever. But I know when you told me, you thought, this is a way that I want to help make people's lives better. I want to help change the world. I want to help make this world a better place. How can I do that? And you've done this podcast. So well done, my friend. You are demonstrating, obviously, the value that you want to communicate to the world. So I'm going to turn this back around. As we finish this podcast, I have a simple question for you.
Oh,
Warren, you're standing on top of a mountain. The world is paying attention to what you have to say. What's the one thing you would say?
I think if I could boil it down to 2 words, it would be love each other.
That's 3 words.
Love each other. Love each other. 3 words. Wow.
That's awesome. There's 3 kinds of people in this world: those who are good at math and those who aren't.
Oh, wow. Okay. Anyway, moving right along. So I'm not used to being the guest. I have an excuse.
There you go, my friend. Love each other. I love it.
It is love each other.
High five.
And I think though that it comes down to that, and I think that everything boils out of that. If we just love each other because we're doing things for the right reasons, we're telling the truth, we're being honest, we're acting with integrity, and that boils it all down into those simple things that makes the difference.
Yeah. Yep. I concur, my friend.
And my math ain't that great. So thank you for thank you for pointing that out. Number 1, thank you for keep tossing the pebbles into the pond, Dave. Because of you, the world is a better place. So I want to thank you ever so much for your time. I know we went over and that's okay because it was so worth it. But if people want to find you, Dave, where do they go?
They could go to wholeheartedleaders.com, or they could go to MacLeangroup.com, MacLean, MacLean, and that's got my tech work and my Wholehearted Leaders work from there. So,
and are you on any social platforms that if people want to try to reach out to you?
Yeah, I've got to do more of that. LinkedIn, you could find me on LinkedIn. That's really, I don't do Facebook or Twitter or any of that stuff, and probably should start to do that, but LinkedIn would be my biggest social platform.
Okay, well, so wholeheartedleaders.com and LinkedIn,
MacLeangroup.com.
Okay, that's where they can find you if they want to. So if anybody is interested in leadership, I mean, definitely please reach out to Dave because the work that you're doing is amazing and very, very, very impressive.
Thank you.
As I said, you make the world a better place, Dave.
Well, thank you, Warren. I really appreciate the invitation to be here and connect, and would welcome the opportunity whenever you want to have a conversation. And thank you for your encouragement.
So there we have it, folks. We had a great time here today with Dave MacLean. This is Warren Barry flocking off to take you beyond the pond to better the pond because we're better together. Thank you so much.
Awesome, brother. Thanks, Warren.